The dust had barely settled on the stranger's boots when Katherine Prescott handed him the last piece of bread from her apron pocket, not knowing the cowboy watching from across the dusty street would change her life forever. Katherine's stomach had been growling for 2 days straight, but the old man stumbling into Shafter looked worse than she felt. His face was sunburned raw, lips cracked and bleeding, eyes hollow with exhaustion. Without thinking, she had reached into her pocket and pulled out the small wrapped bundle she had been saving for supper. The man's trembling hands accepted it with tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. "God bless you, miss," he whispered hoarsely. "God bless you." She watched him shuffle toward the church at the end of town, clutching that bread like it was gold, and felt her own hunger pains twist harder. But she did not regret it. Katherine had never been able to watch someone suffer when she had even the smallest thing to offer, even if it meant her own belly would stay empty another night. "That was a kind thing you did." The voice came from behind her, deep and warm like whiskey over stones. Katherine turned to find a tall cowboy standing there, his hat tilted back to reveal a sun-bronzed face and eyes the color of creek water in summer. He looked about 25, maybe 26, with broad shoulders and the lean, muscular build of a man who spent his days in the saddle. His clothes were dusty from travel, but well-maintained, and a silver star caught the afternoon light on his chest. "Deputy?" Katherine acknowledged with a slight nod, suddenly aware of how threadbare her own dress looked, how her dark hair had escaped its pins to hang in wisps around her face. "Name's Gabriel Irwin," he said, stepping closer. "Just got into town this morning. I am the new deputy marshal assigned to this territory. Katherine Prescott." She folded her arms across her middle, trying to hide the way her dress hung looser than it should have. "Welcome to Shafter, Deputy Irwin." His eyes studied her face with an intensity that made her cheeks warm. "I saw what you did just now, giving that old-timer your food." "It was just bread," she said quickly, glancing away. "Nothing special." "It was your last piece of food, was it not?" Katherine's eyes snapped back to his. How did he know that? Gabriel's expression had softened, and something in his gaze made her throat tighten. "I have been watching the town since I arrived," he explained, "trying to get a sense of the people here. I saw you working at the general store this morning, saw the owner pay you in goods instead of coin, saw you put that bread in your pocket and nothing else. Then you worked through lunch without eating." She felt her face flush hot, embarrassment and something else flooding through her. "That's none of your concern, Deputy." "Maybe not," he agreed. "But what you did just now, giving away your last food to a stranger who needed it more, that tells me something important about you." He stepped closer, and she caught the scent of leather and sage. "You are truly good, Miss Prescott. That is rare in this world. That is precious." The words hit her like a physical thing, settling warm in her chest. No one had ever called her good before. Foolish, yes, impractical, too soft-hearted for her own welfare. But never good, never in a way that sounded like it mattered, like it was something valuable. "I should get back to work," she managed, her voice unsteady. "Mr. Holloway will wonder where I have gone." "When do you finish at the store?" "Sundown." "Have you got supper plans?" Katherine almost laughed at that. Supper plans required having supper. "No, Deputy." "Then let me buy you dinner at the hotel restaurant, please. I would like to know more about this town, and you seem like someone who would give me the honest truth about things." She should have said no, should have made some excuse and hurried away. But Katherine had not had a real meal in 3 days, and something in Gabriel Irwin's steady gaze made her want to say yes for reasons that had nothing to do with hunger. "All right," she heard herself say, "I will meet you there at sundown." His face broke into a smile that transformed him from handsome to breathtaking. "I will be counting the hours, Miss Prescott." Katherine walked back toward the general store in a daze, her stomach still empty but her heart inexplicably full. She did not understand what had just happened, did not know why a simple compliment from a stranger had shaken her so thoroughly. But as she pushed open the door to resume her work, she caught herself smiling. The afternoon dragged by with agonizing slowness. Katherine stocked shelves, swept floors, and helped customers, all while trying not to think about Gabriel Irwin or the way he had looked at her or the dinner waiting at the end of the day. Her employer, Edmund Holloway, was a pinch-faced man of 40 who ran the store with an iron fist and paid his workers as little as possible. Katherine had been lucky to get this job 6 months ago when she'd arrived in Shafter with nothing but the clothes on her back and a desperate need to disappear. "You are distracted today, Miss Prescott," Holloway said sharply, as she nearly knocked over a display of canned goods. "Mind your work, or I will dock your pay." "Yes, sir. Sorry, sir." She forced herself to focus, but her mind kept drifting back to Creekwater Eyes and that deep voice saying, "You are truly good." No one had looked at her like that in so long. No one had seen her, really seen her, in what felt like forever. By the time the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Catherine's hands were shaking. She untied her work apron, smoothed down her worn dress, and tried to make herself presentable. It was a losing battle. The dress had been mended too many times, the fabric faded from too many washings. Her boots were scuffed, and the sole of the left one was starting to separate. She looked like what she was, a woman scraping by on the edge of survival, and for a moment she considered not going at all. But then she remembered the warmth in Gabriel's eyes and thought maybe, just maybe, he would not care about her shabby appearance. The hotel restaurant was the nicest establishment in Shafter, which was not saying much, but it had real tablecloths and candles and the smell of roasted meat that made Catherine's mouth water. Gabriel was already there, standing near the entrance, and his face lit up when he saw her. "Miss Prescott," he said, offering his arm, "you look lovely." It was a lie, but a kind one, and she appreciated it. "Thank you, Deputy." "Gabriel, please, we are not on official business tonight." He led her to a corner table, pulled out her chair like she was a lady instead of a shop girl, and settled across from her with that easy smile. The waiter appeared, and Gabriel ordered without hesitation, roast beef and potatoes and vegetables and fresh bread, more food than Katherine had seen in weeks. "I took the liberty of ordering for both of us," he said. "I hope that's all right." "More than all right," she managed. They talked while they waited for the food. Gabriel told her about growing up on a ranch in Wyoming, about joining the Marshal Service 3 years ago, about the long journey south to Texas. He asked about her life, and Katherine found herself telling him a carefully edited version about growing up in Missouri, about coming west to make a new start. She did not tell him about the man she had fled, the husband who had used his fists more than his words, the night she had finally run with nothing but her life. Some truths were too heavy for a first conversation. When the food arrived, Katherine had to force herself not to fall on it like a starving animal. She cut small bites, chewed slowly, tried to maintain some dignity even as her body screamed for nourishment. Gabriel watched her with knowing eyes but said nothing, just kept the conversation going, giving her space to eat without feeling observed. "So tell me about Shafter," he said, cutting into his own beef. "What should a new deputy know about this town?" Katherine swallowed a mouthful of potatoes, real butter melting on her tongue. "It is a hard place," she said honestly. "Most people here are barely getting by. The silver mine plays out more every year, and the ranches struggle with drought and rustlers. Mr. Holloway is one of the few men making any real money, and he does it by keeping his workers poor and his prices high." Gabriel's jaw tightened. "He does not pay you fairly." "He pays what he thinks I am worth, which is not much." She took another bite, savoring it. "But it is work, and work is hard to come by for a woman alone." "You have no family here?" "No family anywhere," Katherine said quietly. "My parents died when I was young. I was married for a while, but my husband passed." Another lie, but easier than the truth. "I came to Shafter hoping for a fresh start." "And is that what you found?" She considered the question while finishing her vegetables. "I found survival. That counts for something." "You deserve more than survival, Katherine." He said her name carefully, like he was testing how it felt on his tongue. "You deserve a life, not just an existence. That is a luxury most people cannot afford, Deputy." "Gabriel," he corrected again. "And maybe I can help change that. Part of my job is making sure this town is safe and fair for everyone, not just the wealthy few." Something flickered in Katherine's chest, something dangerous that felt like hope. She pushed it down. Hope had disappointed her too many times before. They finished dinner, and Gabriel insisted on ordering dessert, apple pie with cream that tasted like heaven. Katherine ate every bite, feeling more human than she had in months. When the meal finally ended and they stepped out into the cool evening air, she felt almost light-headed from the combination of food and company. "Thank you," she said, turning to face him in the lamplight spilling from the hotel windows. "That was incredibly kind of you." "It was my pleasure, Katherine. Truly." He hesitated, then reached out to take her hand. His fingers were warm and calloused, strong but gentle. "May I walk you home?" She should have said no, should have protected herself from whatever this was building between them. But Katherine found herself nodding, and Gabriel tucked her hand into the crook of his elbow as they began walking through the quiet streets. She lived in a boarding house on the edge of town, a sagging structure that housed 6 other women in similar circumstances. Her room was barely larger than a closet, but it was hers, and it was safe. When they reached the front steps, she reluctantly pulled her hand free. "Thank you again," she said softly, "for everything. Katherine, I would like to see you again, if you are willing." Her heart hammered against her ribs. Why? The question seemed to surprise him, because in the few hours I have known you, you have impressed me more than anyone I have met in years, because you gave away your last bread to a stranger and thought nothing of it. Because when you talk, you tell the truth even when a lie would be easier. Because you are beautiful and brave, and I would very much like to know you better. Katherine felt tears prick her eyes. "You do not know anything about me." "Then let me learn, please." She should have said no, should have protected her battered heart from another potential breaking. But Gabriel was looking at her with such open honesty, such genuine interest, that she found herself nodding. "All right," she whispered. "Yes." His smile could have lit up the whole town. "Tomorrow is Sunday. Would you let me escort you to church and then perhaps a walk afterward?" "I would like that." Gabriel lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that sent warmth flooding through her entire body. "Until tomorrow, then. Good night, Katherine." "Good night, Gabriel." She watched him walk away, his tall frame silhouetted against the lamplight, and wondered what on earth she had just agreed to. But when she climbed the stairs to her tiny room and lay down on her narrow bed, she was smiling. The next morning dawned bright and clear, the Texas sun already promising heat by the time Katherine woke. She washed carefully with the water in her basin, using a sliver of soap she usually saved for special occasions. Her wardrobe was limited, but she had one dress that was slightly better than the others, a simple blue cotton that brought out the color of her eyes. She pinned her dark hair up carefully, wishing she had a ribbon or some decoration, but making do with what she had. Gabriel was waiting outside the boarding house when she descended, looking impossibly handsome in clean clothes and a string tie. His face brightened when he saw her. "You look beautiful," he said, and this time it did not feel like a lie. They walked to church together, and Katherine was acutely aware of the stares and whispers that followed them. Shafter was a small town, and gossip spread faster than wildfire. By tomorrow, everyone would know that the new deputy had courted the shop girl, would have opinions about whether she was good enough for him or if he was making a mistake. But Gabriel seemed oblivious to the attention, keeping his focus entirely on her. They sat together in the back pew, and when the sermon began, he leaned slightly toward her so their shoulders brushed. It was a small thing, but it made Katherine feel less alone than she had in months. After the service, they walked out into the sunshine and headed toward the edge of town where the desert began to sprawl endlessly. The landscape was harsh but beautiful, all red rock and scrub brush and vast sky. Gabriel offered his arm again, and Katherine took it, letting him guide her along a dusty path. "Tell me more about yourself," he said as they walked. "What do you love? What makes you happy?" Katherine had to think about that. It had been so long since anyone had asked her about happiness. "I love reading," she said finally, "though I do not get to do much of it anymore. Books are expensive, and the boarding house does not have a library. I love sunrise, the way the world looks fresh and new before the day gets hard. I love the sound of rain, though we do not get much of it here. And I love flowers, the way they grow beautiful even in harsh conditions." "What kind of flowers?" "Any kind, really, but I especially love wildflowers, the ones that nobody plants but that come up anyway, determined to bloom no matter what." Gabriel was quiet for a moment, and when Katherine glanced at him, she found him watching her with an expression she could not quite read. "What?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious. "You are like that," he said quietly. "A wildflower, blooming despite harsh conditions." Her breath caught. "I'm not blooming. I'm barely surviving." "You're wrong. The fact that you still have kindness in you, that you still think of others even when you are struggling yourself, that is blooming. that is growing beauty in harsh ground. Katherine felt tears threaten again and blinked them back fiercely. She was not used to this, to being seen so clearly, to having someone speak to the core of who she was. "Tell me about you," she said, deflecting. "What does the new deputy marshal love?" Gabriel smiled. "Horses, good horses, the kind with spirit and intelligence. I love open spaces, being able to ride for miles and see nothing but sky and land. I love justice, which probably sounds ridiculous, but I really do. I love seeing wrongs made right, seeing people protected who cannot protect themselves. And I love honesty. I have seen too much lying and corruption in this world. When I meet someone genuine, someone real, it feels like finding gold." "Is that what you think I am? Genuine?" "I know you are. I saw it in your eyes when you gave that man your bread. I saw it when you talked about your life without trying to make it sound better than it is. You do not pretend, Katherine. That is rare and precious." They walked for another hour, talking about everything and nothing. Gabriel told her funny stories about his work, about the characters he had met on the trail, about his dreams of someday having his own ranch. Katherine found herself opening up more than she had intended, sharing her hopes of someday having a real home, a place that was truly hers, maybe a garden where she could grow those wildflowers she loved. When they finally turned back toward town, the sun was high and hot, but Katherine barely noticed. She felt lighter than she had in years, like some weight she had been carrying had been set down, at least for a little while. "May I see you again tomorrow evening?" Gabriel asked as they approached the boarding house. "I know you work during the day, but perhaps dinner again?" "I cannot let you keep buying me meals," Katherine protested. "It is too much." "It is not nearly enough," he said seriously. "And I want to, Katherine. I want to spend time with you. Please let me." How could she say no to that? "All right. Tomorrow evening." He kissed her hand again, letting his lips linger a moment longer this time, and Katherine felt heat that had nothing to do with the Texas sun. The pattern repeated itself over the next 2 weeks. Katherine worked during the day, and Gabriel appeared every evening to take her to dinner or for walks or simply to sit on the boarding house steps and talk as the sun set. They talked about everything, sharing histories and dreams and fears. Gabriel told her about losing his mother to fever when he was 12, about his father's death in a riding accident 2 years later. Katherine found herself sharing more of her truth, carefully at first, then more boldly, as she realized Gabriel did not judge her. One evening, as they sat watching stars emerge in the darkening sky, she finally told him about her husband. "I was married," she said quietly, "but he did not die. I ran away." Gabriel's hand found hers in the darkness. "Why?" "Because he hurt me. Because I was afraid that one day he would kill me. So I waited until he was away, and I took what little money we had, and I ran. I've been running ever since." She waited for judgment, for disgust, for blame, but Gabriel just squeezed her hand gently. "How long ago?" "Almost a year now. I went from town to town, never staying long, always afraid he would find me. But I was so tired, Gabriel, so tired of running. So I came to Shafter and decided to stay, to try to build something, even if it was small." "Does he know where you are?" "I do not think so. I was careful. I used my maiden name. I left no trail." "Katherine, look at me." She turned to find his eyes serious in the starlight. "You are safe here. I will make sure of it. If he comes looking for you, he will have to go through me first, and I promise you, he will not hurt you again." The tears came then, hot and fast, and Gabriel pulled her into his arms, letting her cry against his chest while he murmured soothing words. When the storm finally passed, Katherine pulled back, embarrassed. "I am sorry. I did not mean to fall apart on you. Do not apologize for feeling, for trusting me with your truth. That took courage. I was afraid you would think less of me. For running from a man who beat you. Katherine, leaving took more strength than staying ever could have. You saved your own life. There is no shame in that." Something inside her that had been clenched tight for months finally began to loosen. Maybe she could trust this. Maybe she could trust him. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For seeing me. For not treating me like I'm broken. You're not broken. You're strong and brave and good. Do not ever forget that." That night, when Katherine went to bed, she realized something that both thrilled and terrified her. She was falling in love with Gabriel Irwin. The realization should have sent her running. Love had brought her nothing but pain before, but Gabriel was different from any man she had ever known. He was gentle and kind, but not weak. He was strong without being cruel. He listened when she talked, really listened, and remembered the things she said. He treated her like she mattered, like her thoughts and feelings were important, and the way he looked at her made her feel beautiful for the first time in her life. Over the following weeks, their relationship deepened. Gabriel was never improper, always respectful of her reputation, but the tension between them grew thick as honey. Katherine found herself thinking about him constantly, counting the hours until she would see him again. At work, she caught herself smiling for no reason, and even Edmund Holloway's sharp tongue could not dampen her mood. Then came the day that everything changed. Katherine was restocking shelves when the door to the general store burst open with such force that it slammed against the wall. She turned, and her blood turned to ice. There, silhouetted in the doorway, stood Martin Prescott, her husband. He looked older than she remembered, harder, with new lines carved into his face and a meanness in his eyes that made her stomach clench with remembered fear. He scanned the store, and when his gaze landed on her, he smiled. "There you are, wife. Been looking for you for months." Katherine's hands were shaking so badly she nearly dropped the can she was holding. "Martin, how did you find me?" "It was not easy," he admitted, stalking closer. She backed up instinctively until her spine hit the shelf behind her. "But I'm a patient man. Asked questions in every town from Missouri to Texas, finally found someone who remembered a dark-haired woman traveling alone, heading south, tracked you here to this dusty little nowhere town. You should not have come. I'm not going back with you." His smile disappeared. "You are my wife. You belong to me. Now stop this foolishness and gather your things. We are leaving." "No." The word came out stronger than she felt. "I am not your property, Martin. We are finished." His hand shot out faster than she could react, grabbing her wrist hard enough to make her cry out. "You do not tell me no. You do not get to leave me and shame me and think you can just start a new life. You are coming home, and when we get there, you are going to learn what happens to disobedient wives." Let go of her. The voice was cold as winter ice, and Katherine had never been so relieved to hear anything in her life. Gabriel stood in the doorway, hand resting on the gun at his hip, his whole body coiled like a rattlesnake ready to strike. Martin's eyes narrowed. "Who the hell are you?" "Deputy Marshal Gabriel Irwin, and I will say it once more. Let go of her." "This is none of your concern, Deputy. This is between me and my wife. She does not want to go with you. That makes it my concern." Martin's grip on Katherine's wrist tightened painfully. "You have been telling tales about me, have you? Making me out to be some kind of villain? I have every right to take my wife home." "You have no rights here." Gabriel stepped into the store, and Katherine could see the dangerous edge in his eyes, the lawman ready to enforce justice. "You are hurting her. Release her now, or I will arrest you for assault." "Arrest me? For disciplining my own wife?" Martin laughed, but there was no humor in it. "What kind of backward town is this? The kind where we do not tolerate men who hurt women. Last warning." For a moment, Katherine thought Martin would refuse, would escalate this into violence, but something in Gabriel's eyes must have convinced him that the deputy was deadly serious. He released Katherine's wrist with a shove that sent her stumbling, and she barely caught herself on the shelf. "This is not over," Martin said, glaring at her. "You are still my wife, Katherine. I still have legal claim to you." "Get out," Gabriel said quietly. "Get out of this town and do not come back." "Or what? You will shoot me for trying to retrieve my own property?" "If necessary." The two men stared at each other, the air crackling with tension. Finally, Martin spat on the floor and stalked toward the door. "I will be back," he said, looking at Katherine. "You cannot hide behind a deputy forever. Sooner or later, you will be alone, and I will be waiting." Then he was gone, the door swinging shut behind him. Katherine's legs gave out, and she slid down the wall, shaking uncontrollably. Gabriel was beside her in an instant, his arms around her, pulling her close. "It is all right," he murmured. "You are safe. I have got you." "He found me," she gasped through tears. "After all this time, he found me. Oh God, Gabriel, he will never stop. He will keep coming until he drags me back or kills me. No, he will not. I will not let that happen. You do not understand. He is obsessed with control, with ownership. Me leaving was the worst insult I could have given him. He will not rest until he has made me pay for it. Gabriel pulled back enough to look at her face, his hands gentle as he wiped away her tears. Katherine, listen to me. You are not alone anymore. You have me, and I will protect you. That man will not touch you again. I swear it. You cannot watch me every moment. You have a job, responsibilities. Then we will figure something out, but I will not let him take you. Do you trust me? Did she? Could she? Katherine looked into Gabriel's eyes and saw nothing but fierce determination and something deeper, something that looked like love. She nodded slowly. Yes, I trust you. Good. Now, are you hurt? Let me see your wrist. She held out her arm, and they both winced at the red marks already darkening into bruises. Gabriel's jaw clenched, but when he touched her, his fingers were feather light. I should have broken his hand for this, he muttered. It is not as bad as it has been before, Katherine said without thinking, then immediately regretted it when she saw the pain flash across Gabriel's face. How long? He asked quietly. How long did he hurt you? 3 years. We married when I was 19. I ran just after my 22nd birthday. God, Katherine. He pulled her close again, and she felt him tremble. I'm so sorry. You should never have had to endure that. They sat there on the floor of the general store, holding each other, until Edmund Holloway came bustling from the back room, demanding to know what all the commotion was about. Gabriel helped Katherine to her feet and explained the situation in clipped professional tones. Holloway looked annoyed more than concerned, worried about his store more than his employee, but he grudgingly agreed to let Katherine leave early. Gabriel walked her back to the boarding house, his hand never leaving the small of her back, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings for any sign of Martin. When they reached her room, he checked every corner, looked out the window, made sure the lock on the door was solid. I do not like you being here alone, he said. That lock would not stop a determined man. It is the best I can afford. He was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then he said, Marry me. Katherine was sure she had heard him wrong. What? Marry me, he repeated, turning to face her fully. I know this is fast. I know we have only known each other a few weeks. But Katherine, I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you. I have loved you since I saw you give that man your last bread, since you looked at me with those honest eyes and told me the truth about your life. Marry me, and you will be legally free from Martin. Marry me, and I can protect you properly. Marry me because I cannot imagine my life without you in it. Her heart was racing so fast she felt dizzy. Gabriel, you do not have to do this. You do not have to marry me out of obligation or pity. Is that what you think this is? He took her hands gently, careful of her bruised wrist. Katherine, I am asking you to marry me because I am in love with you, because you are the bravest, kindest, most beautiful woman I have ever met, because when I think about my future, you are in every picture. This is not about obligation. This is about my heart, which belongs to you whether you want it or not. Tears were streaming down her face again. I love you too, she whispered. I've been trying not to, trying to protect myself, but I cannot help it. I love you so much, it terrifies me. Then say yes. Say yes and let me spend the rest of my life showing you what love is supposed to be. Let me give you the home and the safety and the happiness you deserve. Katherine thought about the life she had been living, scraping by, always afraid, always alone. Then she thought about Gabriel, about the way he made her feel seen and valued and cherished, about the possibility of a real future, a real life with a man who actually loved her. Yes, she said. Yes, I will marry you. Gabriel's smile was brilliant as the sun. He cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. Katherine melted into it, her hands fisting in his shirt, kissing him back with all the love and hope and relief flooding through her. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Gabriel rested his forehead against hers. We will do this properly, he said. I will talk to the preacher tomorrow. We can be married by the end of the week." "That fast? That fast? I do not want to wait, and more importantly, I want you legally protected from Martin as soon as possible. Once we are married, he will have no claim on you whatsoever." The wedding took place 4 days later in the small church at the edge of town. Katherine wore a new dress that Gabriel had insisted on buying, simple cream-colored cotton with lace at the collar. She carried a bouquet of wildflowers that Gabriel had ridden out at dawn to pick, remembering what she had said about loving flowers that bloomed despite harsh conditions. There were few guests, just a handful of townspeople who had grown fond of Katherine and wanted to wish her well, but Katherine barely noticed them. Her entire focus was on Gabriel, standing at the altar in his best clothes, looking at her like she was the most precious thing in the world. The ceremony was simple and quick. The preacher said the words, they repeated their vows, and then Gabriel was sliding a simple gold band onto her finger. "I now pronounce you man and wife. You may kiss your bride." Gabriel pulled her close and kissed her thoroughly, and Katherine heard a few chuckles from the small congregation. But she did not care. She was married to a man who loved her, who would protect her, who saw her as more than property. It felt like a miracle. They walked out of the church into bright afternoon sunshine, and Katherine felt lighter than air. Gabriel had arranged for them to stay in the hotel for a few nights, a proper honeymoon, even if they could not leave town. He carried her over the threshold of their room, and Katherine laughed, actually laughed, something she had not done in years. That night, Gabriel showed her what love was supposed to be. He was patient and gentle, asking permission for every touch, making sure she felt safe and wanted. When Katherine cried, he held her close and murmured reassurances until the tears turned to joy. She fell asleep in his arms, feeling, for the first time in her life, like she was exactly where she belonged. The next few weeks were the happiest Katherine had ever known. Gabriel rented a small house on the edge of town, nothing fancy, but it was theirs, and Katherine threw herself into making it a home. She planted wildflowers in the small yard, hung curtains in the windows, learned to cook the meals Gabriel loved. He came home every evening looking tired from his work, but his face would light up when he saw her, and he would sweep her into his arms like they had been apart for years instead of hours. They fell into an easy rhythm, learning each other's habits and quirks. Gabriel left his boots by the door and his hat on the hook. Katherine liked to read in the evening while he cleaned his guns and wrote reports. They talked endlessly, about everything and nothing, building a foundation of understanding and trust. But in the back of Katherine's mind, there was always the fear that Martin would return. She caught herself watching the windows, jumping at unexpected sounds, tensing whenever a stranger came to town. Gabriel noticed, of course, and did his best to reassure her, but they both knew the threat was real. 2 months after their wedding, Martin made his move. Katherine was working in her garden one morning, Gabriel having left early to ride out to one of the ranches where there had been reports of cattle rustling. She was so focused on her flowers that she did not hear footsteps behind her until it was too late. A hand clamped over her mouth and an arm like an iron band wrapped around her waist, lifting her off the ground. Katherine tried to scream, tried to fight, but Martin was bigger and stronger and had the element of surprise. "Did you really think you could escape me?" he hissed in her ear, dragging her toward a horse tied at the side of the house. "Did you think marrying some small-town deputy would save you? You belong to me, Katherine. You always will." Panic flooded through her, but Katherine forced herself to think. Gabriel had taught her some basic self-defense, had made her promise to fight if anyone ever tried to hurt her. She went limp suddenly, making herself dead weight, and Martin stumbled. In that moment, she drove her elbow back as hard as she could into his ribs. Martin grunted and loosened his grip just enough for Katherine to wrench herself free. She ran for the house, screaming for help, but Martin was faster. He caught her on the porch, slamming her against the door hard enough to knock the breath from her lungs. "You little witch!" he snarled, his hand closing around her throat. "I am going to make you sorry you ever defied me. I'm going to make you sorry you were ever born." Katherine clawed at his hands, unable to breathe, black spots dancing in her vision. This was it, she thought. This was how she would die, just when she had finally found happiness. Then there was the sound of a gunshot, and Martin jerked back, releasing her. Katherine collapsed to the porch, gasping for air, and looked up to see Gabriel standing in the yard, his gun drawn, his face a mask of cold fury. "Step away from her," Gabriel said, his voice deadly calm. "Step away right now, or the next bullet goes through your head instead of over it." Martin raised his hands slowly, taking a step back. Blood was running from a gash on his temple where the bullet had grazed him. "She is my wife." "No, she is not. She is my wife. You have no claim on her, no rights here, and you just committed assault in front of a federal marshal. That is a hanging offense in this territory. You cannot prove anything. It is her word against mine. Actually, you are wrong about that." The new voice came from the side of the house, and Katherine turned to see Mrs. Chen, the elderly woman who lived next door, standing there with a rifle. "I saw the whole thing. Saw you grab her from the garden, saw you try to strangle her on the porch. I came out here to stop you, but looks like the deputy beat me to it." Other neighbors were emerging now, drawn by the gunshot and the commotion. They formed a loose circle around Martin, and Katherine saw fear flicker in his eyes for the first time. "Katherine, come here," Gabriel said without taking his eyes off Martin. "Come here, sweetheart." She stumbled toward him on shaking legs, and the moment she was close enough, Gabriel pulled her behind him, keeping his body between her and Martin. "You have two choices," Gabriel said to Martin. "You can come peacefully to the jail, where you will await trial for assault and attempted kidnapping. Or you can try to fight, and I will shoot you where you stand. I'm hoping you choose the second option, to be honest." The look in Gabriel's eyes said he was not bluffing. Martin must have seen it too, because he slowly lowered his hands. "All right," he said. "All right, I will come peacefully." Gabriel cuffed him quickly, then handed him off to one of the townsmen who had responded to the commotion. "Take him to the jail and lock him up. I will be there shortly to file official charges." Once Martin was being led away, Gabriel turned to Katherine, his hands gentle as they framed her face. "Are you hurt? Let me see your neck." There would be bruises, they both knew it, but nothing permanent. Katherine threw her arms around Gabriel and held on tight, trembling with reaction. "I thought he was going to kill me," she whispered. "I thought I would never see you again." "Shh, it is over. He cannot hurt you anymore. He's going to jail, and then he's going to hang. You are safe now, Katherine. You are finally safe." And standing there in her husband's arms, surrounded by neighbors who had come to her defense, Katherine finally believed it. Martin's trial was held 2 weeks later. The circuit judge listened to Katherine's testimony, to Mrs. Chen's account of what she had witnessed, to Gabriel's professional report. Martin tried to defend himself, tried to paint Katherine as a runaway wife who needed disciplining, but the judge was not sympathetic. "In this territory, we do not tolerate violence against women, regardless of marital status," the judge declared. "You have been found guilty of assault, attempted kidnapping, and assault with intent to kill. I hereby sentence you to 20 years of hard labor in the territorial prison. May God have mercy on your soul, because this court has none." Katherine watched as they led Martin away in chains and felt a weight lift from her shoulders that she had been carrying for years. He was gone. He could not hurt her anymore. She was truly free. Gabriel took her hand as they left the courthouse, and she leaned into him, drawing strength from his solid presence. "How do you feel?" he asked quietly. "Like I can finally breathe," she said honestly. "Like I can finally start living instead of just surviving." "Good. Because I have plans for our life, Mrs. Irwin. Big plans." She smiled up at him. "Oh, and what kind of plans would those be?" "Well, for starters, I have been thinking about that ranch I always wanted. There is a nice piece of land about 10 miles outside town that is up for sale. Good water, decent grass, enough space to run cattle and horses. I've been saving my pay, and I think we could manage it if we are careful." Katherine's heart swelled. "You want to leave the marshal service?" "I've been doing this work for 3 years, and I'm tired, Katherine. Tired of chasing bad men, tired of violence, tired of being away from you. I want to build something instead of just tearing things down. I want to raise horses and cattle. I want to come home to you every night, and I want to fill that house with children who never have to be afraid." "Children?" Katherine repeated softly, her hand moving unconsciously to her stomach. Gabriel's eyes widened. "Katherine, are you saying what I think you are saying?" She nodded, unable to keep the smile from her face. "I was going to tell you tonight. I'm about 2 months along." Gabriel let out a whoop of joy that turned heads all down the street. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing, and Katherine found herself laughing too, pure happiness bubbling up from some deep well inside her. "We are having a baby," Gabriel said, his eyes bright with tears. "Oh, Katherine, we are having a baby. Are you happy? Happy? I'm the luckiest man alive. The most beautiful, brave, incredible woman in the world is my wife, and she is carrying my child. How could I be anything but happy?" He kissed her right there on the street, and Katherine did not care who was watching. This was her life now, this joy, this love, this future stretching out bright and full of promise. After so much darkness, she had finally found the light. Gabriel put in his notice with the Marshal Service that same day. His supervisor was sorry to lose him, but understood the pull of family and land. They gave him a month to finish up his current cases and train his replacement, and Gabriel used every spare moment to plan their new life. He bought the land he had been eyeing, and they spent weekends riding out to survey their property, planning where the house would go, where the barn would sit, how many head of cattle they could manage at first. Katherine loved those days, riding across the open land with the wind in her hair and Gabriel at her side, talking about the future they would build together. When Gabriel finally hung up his badge for good, there was a celebration at the hotel. The townspeople had grown fond of their deputy marshal, and they wanted to send him off properly. There were speeches and toasts and good-natured ribbing, and Gabriel stood at the front of the room with his arm around Katherine, smiling wider than she had ever seen. "Thank you all for welcoming me to Shafter," he said when it was his turn to speak. "This town gave me more than a job. It gave me a home, and more importantly, it gave me Katherine. I came here thinking I would serve justice and then move on to the next town, the next assignment. But I stayed because of a woman who gave her last bread to a stranger and taught me what true goodness looks like. I stayed because I fell in love, and that love changed everything. So thank you, Shafter. Thank you for the best chapter of my life." Katherine was crying, of course, but they were happy tears. Gabriel pulled her close and kissed her forehead, and the room erupted in cheers. They moved to the ranch in early spring of 1883, when Katherine was 5 months pregnant and starting to show. The house was small but well built, with 2 bedrooms and a large main room with a stone fireplace. Gabriel had hired some men to help him put up a barn and fencing, and Katherine threw herself into making the house a home. She planted flowers all around the front porch, wild flowers that would bloom despite the harsh Texas sun. She hung curtains and arranged furniture and set up the small bedroom as a nursery, painting the walls a cheerful yellow and sewing tiny clothes while Gabriel built a cradle from oak wood. Their first herd was small, just 20 head of cattle and 5 horses, but it was a start. Gabriel worked from sunrise to sunset, building their dream, and Katherine worked beside him as much as her growing belly would allow. They fell into bed exhausted every night and woke before dawn to do it all again, and Katherine had never been happier. When her labor started on a hot July morning, Gabriel was ready. He had already arranged for the doctor from town to stay at a nearby ranch, ready to come at a moment's notice. Mrs. Chen had agreed to come help with the delivery, and she arrived within an hour of Gabriel's summons, calm and capable. The labor was long and hard, 14 hours of pain that left Katherine exhausted and scared. But every time she felt like she could not go on, Gabriel was there, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, telling her how strong she was, how proud he was, how much he loved her. Finally, as the sun was setting in brilliant shades of orange and red, their son came into the world with a lusty cry that made them both laugh through tears. "A boy," the doctor announced, placing the squalling infant on Katherine's chest. "A healthy, strong boy." Katherine looked down at her son, at his tiny red face and waving fists, and felt her heart expand in ways she had not known were possible. Gabriel knelt beside the bed, his hand gentle on the baby's downy head, and when he looked up at Katherine, his face was wet with tears. "He is perfect," Gabriel whispered. "Katherine, he is perfect." "What should we name him?" she asked. They had discussed names for months, unable to agree on anything, but looking at her son now, Katherine knew exactly what he should be called. "Thomas," she said, "after your father, Thomas Gabriel Irwin." Gabriel's face crumpled, and he bent to press his forehead against hers. "Thank you," he choked out. "Thank you for giving me this, for giving me everything." "Thank you for saving me," Katherine whispered back. "Thank you for showing me what love is supposed to be." The years that followed were full and rich. The ranch grew slowly but steadily, and Gabriel gained a reputation for breeding some of the finest horses in the territory. Katherine tended her growing garden and her growing family. Thomas was joined by a daughter 2 years later, Emma Grace, who had her mother's dark hair and her father's green eyes. Then came another son, Samuel, and finally another daughter, little Margaret, called Maggie by everyone. The house expanded to accommodate them all, growing wings and rooms as the family grew. Katherine's wildflowers spread until they surrounded the entire property, a riot of color against the harsh landscape. Neighbors came to rely on Gabriel's honest dealings and Katherine's kind heart, and their home became known as a place where anyone in need could find help. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Gabriel woke Katherine before dawn and led her outside to the porch. They sat together watching the sun rise over their land, over the horses grazing in the near pasture, over the garden blooming bright and beautiful. "Do you remember the day we met?" Gabriel asked, his arm around her shoulders. "Of course. I gave that old man my last bread. And I knew right then that you were special, that you were the one I had been waiting for without even knowing it." Katherine leaned into him, content. "You saved me, you know. In every way a person can be saved." "No," Gabriel said softly. "We saved each other. I was just going through the motions before you, Katherine. Just doing my job, moving from town to town, not really living. You gave me a reason to put down roots. You gave me a home and a purpose and a love I did not know existed. You saved me just as much as I saved you." She tilted her face up to kiss him, slow and sweet. "I love you, Gabriel Irwin. I love you, Katherine Irwin. You are truly good, and you are truly mine. And I thank God every day that I was standing on that street the day you gave away your last bread." They sat there as the sun climbed higher, warming the world, lighting up their land and their life. Inside the house, their children still slept, safe and loved. Around them, the wildflowers bloomed bright and stubborn, refusing to give up despite the harsh ground, thriving because they were cared for and tended. Years turned into decades. Their children grew up strong and kind, carrying forward the lessons their parents had taught them about compassion and courage. Thomas took over the ranch when Gabriel's back grew too stiff for long days in the saddle. Emma married a young lawyer from town and moved to San Antonio but visited often. Samuel became a teacher, running the school in Shafter. And Maggie, their youngest, stayed close, marrying the son of a neighboring rancher and building her own home just over the hill. Gabriel's hair turned silver and Katherine's dark locks showed streaks of white, but they still walked hand in hand through her gardens every evening. They still sat on the porch watching sunsets, still shared stories and dreams and quiet moments of contentment. On a warm evening in May of 1908, when they had been married 25 years and the world was changing faster than they could sometimes follow, Gabriel and Katherine sat in their usual spots, watching their grandchildren play in the yard. There were 7 of them now, ranging from toddler to teenager, and their laughter filled the air like music. "We did all right, did we not?" Katherine said, watching little Grace, named for her grandmother Emma's middle name, chase butterflies through the wildflowers. We did better than all right," Gabriel said, taking her hand. "We built something beautiful, Katherine. Not just this ranch or this family, but a life full of love and purpose. We took our pain and our scars and we made something good from them. You told me once that I was like a wildflower, blooming despite harsh conditions. I remember. I think we both are. We both grew up in hard ground, but we found each other, and we bloomed together." Gabriel raised her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles like he had that very first night. "You are truly good, Katherine Irwin. You were then, and you are now, and you will be until your last breath, and I am the luckiest man who ever lived to have you as my wife." Katherine's eyes filled with happy tears. "And you are my hero, Gabriel, my partner, my love, my home. Everything I am, everything I have, I owe to you." "No," he corrected gently. "You owe it to yourself, to your own strength and courage. I just had the privilege of walking beside you." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun painted the sky in shades of gold and rose. Around them, the ranch hummed with life and love and laughter. Inside the house, Emma was making dinner while her sisters-in-law set the table for the big family meal they shared every Sunday. The men were tending to evening chores, and the children played without fear or worry, growing up in the safety and security their grandparents had fought so hard to build. This was the happy ending Katherine had never dared to dream of during those dark years in Missouri. This was the life that had seemed impossible when she was scraping by in Shafter, hungry and alone and afraid. This was the miracle that had started with one simple act of kindness, giving her last bread to a stranger, and the cowboy who had seen her truly for who she was. As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Gabriel pulled Katherine close, and she rested her head on his shoulder, right where it belonged. They had weathered storms and droughts, raised children and built an empire from nothing, loved each other through good times and hard. And they would continue to do so, side by side, until their very last days. Because that is what true love does. It endures, it persists, it blooms even in the harshest ground, turning pain into beauty, fear into courage, loneliness into belonging. And in a small ranch outside Shafter, Texas, surrounded by wildflowers and family and love, Katherine and Gabriel Irwin lived out their days in the happiness they had created together, proving that even the most broken hearts can heal when they find the right person to hold them. Their story became legend in Shafter, passed down through generations. The tale of the poor shop girl who gave her last bread to a stranger, and the deputy marshal who saw her goodness and loved her for it. The story of two wounded souls who found each other and built something beautiful from the ashes of their pasts. And every spring, when the wildflowers bloomed bright and stubborn around the Irwin Ranch, people would remember. They would remember that kindness matters, that goodness is its own reward, that love can heal even the deepest wounds. Gabriel and Katherine grew old together, watching their family expand and flourish. They celebrated the birth of great-grandchildren, saw the turn of a new century, and witnessed the world transform around them. But through it all, their love remained constant, an anchor in changing times. When Gabriel passed quietly in his sleep at the age of 78, with Katherine's hand in his, the whole town mourned. They buried him on the hill overlooking the ranch, surrounded by wildflowers that Katherine had planted decades before. And though Katherine's heart broke with his loss, she took comfort in knowing they had lived a full and beautiful life together. She lived 3 more years without him, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who loved her fiercely. She spent her days in her garden, tending the flowers Gabriel had loved, telling stories to anyone who would listen about the cowboy who had saved her life by seeing her worth. On a warm spring morning in 1914, Katherine Prescott Irwin passed peacefully in her sleep, a smile on her weathered face. They buried her next to Gabriel, under the big oak tree he had planted the year Thomas was born. And in the years that followed, their descendants made sure the wildflowers always bloomed around those graves, a testament to love that refused to die, to beauty that persisted despite harsh conditions, to two people who had found each other against all odds and built a legacy of kindness and compassion. The Irwin Ranch still stands today, run by the great-great-grandchildren of Gabriel and Katherine. And every person who lives there knows the story, knows about the day a poor shop girl gave her last bread to a stranger, and a cowboy saw her goodness and declared she was truly good. They know about the love that followed, the family that grew, the life that bloomed from a single act of kindness. And they remember always that true goodness is never wasted, that love can heal any wound, and that sometimes the best things in life come from giving away what little you have to someone who needs it more. The wildflowers still bloom every spring, bright and stubborn and beautiful, just like the woman who planted them so long ago. Just like the love story that started with kindness and ended in a legacy that would outlast them all.